Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I am finally here to do another one of my pairing artwork with books recommendations video. One of my channel goals in 2020 that I talked about was wanting to get back to some of these video series that I really enjoyed doing, and had just never filmed any more of them. So that's what we're going to be doing today. If you want to get a little bit of an overview of like why I wanted to kind of do recommendations this way, I will link the first video I did down below, which was John William Waterhouse. I took a few paintings from him and paired them with book recommendations. The short version of why I did that is sometimes there's something I really want to communicate about a book and about why I enjoy it and who I would recommend it to, but it's not something that's easily quantifiable. It's kind of like a vibe or a feeling or an atmosphere that I kind of get from a book overall. And for that reason, I think sometimes it's more helpful to compare it to something and say, like, if you're in the mood for this kind of feeling, then you should read this book, kind of thing. Also, it's just fun. Also, disclaimer I did last time, I am not an art expert. I did not study art, I just enjoy it, and that's what we're here for. So the artist I'm going to be talking about today is Zinaida Serebriakova. I did look up several times, several different ways how to pronounce her name, and I think that is correct, but I deeply apologize if that is not. She was a Russian painter who painted during the early and mid-1900s, and she also came from a whole family of artists. And something I find really interesting is the way that her very distinct styles of painting, like she had a few kinds of things that she really painted quite a few of, and the thing that I find very interesting about that is that it really matched certain events that were happening in her life at that time. And of course that's not unusual, you know, for artists to be influenced by things that are happening in their life. But something I thought so interesting about her was that it was such a direct connection. Like there was a time after the Russian Revolution when she was struggling a lot, I believe, and she was staying with, I think it was an opera company or a ballet company, and during that period she painted a lot of kind of backstage scenes of dancers and of ballet dancers and actresses and everything, and I find that so interesting. She had another period after she went to Morocco where a lot of Moroccan influences were in her work, and kind of the overall tone of her paintings also changed quite a bit. She focused a lot on brightness in her earlier period of paintings, and then after the October Revolution her husband died and suddenly she had no income and was responsible for caring for her entire family. I believe she had 4 children, and that saw a lot more serious tones and elements in her paintings. So she's just a very interesting person. I encourage you to learn more about her if you're at all curious. So we're going to be talking about 4 of her paintings today that I'm going to match with books. Some of these are ones that I very rarely talk about on my channel. At least one of them I don't think I've ever mentioned before. And then a couple others are ones that I do talk about, but I especially want to like make a special point to talk about more. By the way, all of these paintings are in the public domain, and I am of course not making any money from this video. So the first painting I'm going to talk about is At the Dressing Table, and this one has kind of an interesting backstory for the way I came across it. I follow on Twitter an account called, I think, Women in Art or Women's Art, and it's super interesting, and I came across this photo that they posted one day, or a photo of this painting, I mean, and I thought it was really interesting. I really liked it, and it seemed so modern and current that I assumed the artist was painting this in like the 70s or 80s at the latest. This painting is from 1909, and I just find that so cool and interesting how, like, you can see these commonalities. It's like even people who lived 100 years ago, it's like you can, like, they feel so immediate. So I just really like this painting by itself, and then kind of the feeling that this one gave me. So it's this woman who looks like she's getting ready for the day or to go out. She's combing her hair, she's got like her dressing table in front of her, and I really love the textures of the like kind of bottles and everything that are on the table. And to me it looks like she's enjoying this. And the feeling that I really got from this painting, which is something I really enjoy in books, is this idea of enjoying being feminine and not being ashamed of that. I think there is a tendency, although we're starting to get a little better about it in books, but I think there's a tendency for strong female characters to have to, or to feel like they have to distance themselves from being feminine or doing things that are traditionally associated with women in order to be strong or important. And I really don't like that. I think by equating feminine things with weak or shameful or less valuable things, we are actually working backwards. So I really enjoy when female characters are allowed to enjoy dresses and enjoy putting on makeup or, you know, doing like girly things or whatever. And the character that really reminded me of this painting is Cress in The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I just love Cress. I love all of the main characters in this series, but Cress might be the one, she's one of the ones I have like the strongest connection to personally, because I just feel like she's so very relatable. I love the way that she's kind of a fangirl, like that she gets really into like movies and storytelling and everything. And like I feel like she'd fit into BookTube, basically. And I love the way that she is unapologetically feminine while at the same time being this amazing coder. Like her hacking abilities would destroy you, and those things are not shown to be mutually exclusive. Like I think a lot of times there's either like you're either like the STEM girl or the girly girl, and I think Cress is a great example of how that doesn't need to happen. I don't really talk about the Lunar Chronicle series that much because I feel like a lot of people know about it, and I feel like a lot of people are starting to feel like it's overhyped, which I understand. I think if you didn't enjoy the series, I can see how it would be very tiring to see it everywhere because it is so popular, but I still really, really love these books. It's one of the series that made me realize I can actually enjoy sci-fi. I think it's one of the first fairy tale retellings I ever read, which obviously that's like a huge part of my reading and my brand now. And I just really love the clever way that Marissa Meyer blends these fairy tales with a futuristic setting and with her own plot and characters. And I think if you were looking for an unapologetically feminine girl, Cress is a great example of that. Like, I just feel like I would want to be Cress's friend, and like I'd love to just like hang out and get ready and like do our makeup and hair or something together. I just think that would be so fun. I like how I say that like I ever do anything with my hair, but you get what I'm talking about. The next painting I'm going to talk about is The Shoots of Autumn Crops, and I think the alternative title for this one is Green Autumn. I don't actually remember the year for this one, but I will put that under the painting. And this one is very different, I think, from a lot of the other paintings I'm going to talk about today. I think this is from one of her earlier periods. Like, so this is very bright, it's very like landscape focused. Serebriakova really liked painting things that really communicated the beauty and the joy of the world, especially in her early period when things were not as bad for her. So there's a real sense of lightness and brightness to this one. And kind of the feeling I get from this painting is a journey. Like, it's traveling and it's hopeful because you can see the road kind of sloping up into the distance. I feel like it gives this perspective of things are going to get better. It's like a hopeful kind of thing. Like, there's a sense of possibility that this painting gives me, and I think that's especially impressive considering I'm not really big on traveling in books or in real life generally. So I think that it's pretty amazing that it can communicate that to me. And the book that I think really encapsulates this feeling for me is Test of the Road by Rachel Hartman. Now this one's a little tricky to recommend because I think when this came out, it might have been marketed as a standalone set in the same world as her Serafina books, and I don't really think that's true. I think to really understand and appreciate this one, it is best to read the Serafina books, or at least the first one. I think you could probably get away with reading Serafina and not reading the sequel and then continuing to Test of the Road. But I love Serafina and Test of the Road, so I think it is well worth it. And this book, it is about a journey. I mean, it's called The Test of the Road, and she does spend a lot of the time traveling, which is not something I tend to enjoy in books. But I really loved the way it was done here, and I think part of that is because Tess's internal journey was just as important. Like, you really see her coming to terms with things that have happened in her life and suffering that she has gone through and realizing that things are not her fault. And it's a story ultimately of hope. Like, there's a lot of heavy stuff that happens in this book, or that is referred to in this book, but it still gives me that overall feeling of things are going to get better from here. Like, there's this line that is repeated over and over in the book that's just walk on, like walk on, Tess. And I think that that's the feeling that this painting gives me, is like you put one foot in front of the other. And I think it can be easy to make that feel reductive or dismissive, like, oh, just get over it, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I don't think that's what this book does, because it acknowledges the hurt that Tess is feeling, it acknowledges the terrible things that have happened to her, and she does too. I just feel like it's a perfect combination of acknowledging that she's hurting and still being able to move past that, at least in some way. Like, she's always going to be affected by these things that happen to her, but it's not going to define her. And just that whole feeling of being on a journey that is ultimately hopeful. That's what I feel from this painting, and that's really what I feel from Tess of the Road. The next painting I want to talk about is Girl with a Candle, and I think this one was painted in 1911, possibly. And I think this one is one of the ones that is listed as a self-portrait. And I just really love this painting. It's hard for me to explain why, but I find the simplicity very appealing. But I feel like the girl's face is so expressive that you don't really need a lot of background or detail. And the book I'm going to talk about with this one is actually the one that I don't think I've ever mentioned before on my channel, and that is this very old novel called Tryst by Elswith Thane. I might not even put a picture of the cover up because, like, this book is so old, I'm not even sure there's many editions that have an actual cover design rather than just like a plain book. But this is an older story, and it's kind of a ghost story and kind of a love story, and it's a very quiet story, and I feel like the main character just perfectly reminds me of this self-portrait of this girl, because she has that sweetness and kindness, but there's a little bit of mischief, or if not mischief, at least curiosity. I mean, the book opens with her picking a lock, and I just feel like that's a great introduction to her character because she's very kind and good, and she's not like a troublemaker exactly, but she has that spark of fun and adventure. And I mean, the fact that she ends up making friends with a ghost, I think, is pretty indicative of that. And this is just such a strange and sweet and lovely story. I remember not being thrilled with something about the ending, but it wasn't enough to make me not enjoy the book. Like, I still really fondly remember that book. I've been thinking about rereading it recently, actually, because it's been a few years. But this is just like such a particular feeling that I get from that book, which is why I thought it would be perfect to do in one of these videos, because it's like there's this very particular feeling of coziness and sadness and joy and that spark of fun or mischief that I think really comes through in this painting, and it's kind of the feeling that I get from Trist, and especially from the main character. I feel really bad I can't remember her name, but it's been a long time since I read that book. And finally, the last Zinaida Serebriakova painting I want to talk about today is another self-portrait, and that is Self-Portrait as Pierrot. And I believe this one was painted in 1911. So speaking of mischief, I feel like the reason I actually wanted to talk about these two paintings next to each other, or in the same video at least, is because they have very similar feelings, but in a very different way. I mean, these are both, I think, self-portraits, so it makes sense that the main figure in them looks very similar. But I feel like this painting has like that mischief turned up to like 11. And for this recommendation, I kind of took this in less of a playful way and more of a, I don't know, like serious troublemaking kind of way. And that's because the series I want to recommend for this one is The Young Elites by Marie Lu. Now, this is still my favorite thing I have read from Marie Lu. It's a fantasy that is inspired by Italy, which is something that I really enjoy. And it's also a villain origin story slash anti-hero story, which is something I'm extremely picky with. But I really, really enjoyed it. You probably have heard about these books because they were kind of big on BookTube a couple of years ago, but I feel like the attention for them has kind of died down, especially with Marie Lu's other books that have come out. I just love this trilogy, and the reason I'm talking about this one is because the main character, Adelina, I really do kind of get the same feeling I get from her as from the figure in this painting. Although again, not so much mischief as like actually causing trouble and doing potentially bad things. And another reason these two make sense to me together is because she's dressed up as Pierrot, who is this very, I think it's kind of like a tragic comic figure, I think, from traditional types of performance. I don't know if Commedia dell'arte had one, a sad jester character, but sometimes they're playful and sometimes it's a little more bittersweet, like I said, and that's kind of the feeling I get from this series, especially the bittersweet parts. I remember finishing the third book, and like that ending is still something that stays with me. Like, it's beautiful and heartrending, but in the best way, and it made so much sense for the story, because that's the thing that I think is most important, is not that the ending is sad and realistic or happy and everything's fine, but that it feels consistent with the story and it feels like it was earned, and I absolutely feel like that with the Young Elite series. There's also a really wonderful exploration of a sister relationship in that series, which I thought was so well done. There's some characters introduced, especially in the second book, where I had kind of made up my mind that I wasn't going to like them, and then I ended up loving them, and it's always nice when an author can like win you over like that. And then as another kind of additional bonus for why I'm suggesting this one, I feel like the mask that she's holding in the painting and kind of the ribbons and everything, and even parts of the costume, that does kind of say like Renaissance Italy to me, which is kind of loosely what the Young Elites setting is based on. So I think extra points for the aesthetic matching. Okay, everybody, so those are some books that I paired with paintings. I feel like some of those I was a little more coherent than others, but hopefully I was able to communicate some things I love about those books, and specifically the kind of feeling or vibe I get from them that matches those paintings. Please let me know if you guys have read any of these, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick any of them up. I'm really excited to continue doing more videos like these, so please let me know what you thought of this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!